Howdy. That's what we say on the range where I live. This isn't my work, but I'm presenting it because I always think that it's really interesting, and I think this audience and a lot of other audiences don't get to see it because unless you go to a RIPE meeting, you don't get to see it. And those of you who are going to the next RIPE meeting, which is next week, there'll be a much better presentation of this by the person who actually did the work there, so you can tune me out. Anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit about the trends in the v6 routing table. The 6 bone's gone, yay! Some other really interesting routing table things that Garrett has found doing this work. So this is the typical up and to the right graph for v6, and I hate to give the punchline now, but we haven't reached 1,000 prefixes yet. And you can see the little dip where the 6 bone went away, and there's some more slides on that. This is the RIR prefix assignments and the v6 ones as they show up in the table, and as you can see on 6606, the 6 bone pretty much went away, which is as planned. Things happened as planned. This is just the last 6 months. It's been pretty steady growth, but still pretty slow. And again, this is the 6 bone going away. The 6 bone went away. There's still one prefix showing up in the table. It was a lot more prevalent the last time I presented this. It looks like only from one AS that Garrett has views in that you can still see this advertisement, and we're not really sure if that's a ghost thing or if AS 4555 is still originating the route, but it doesn't really look like they are because he can't see it from his AS. For those of you who do filter and do v6, stop listening to 3FFE because it's really not supposed to be used until a registry decides that it is. It's gone away. Let's see. For the last 24 months, the little blip, the big huge blip, is some more specifics that got injected by accident. That seems to happen every once in a while. There was also this ghost issue that I'll talk about later that still seems to be going on. And I've been presenting this for Garrett probably for 5 or 6 years now, and the ghosting problem still hasn't gone away. It's pretty scary. And then this is per region. As you can see, the little blip was within Aaron's space. And you can see the distribution of in the routing. This is actually what's in the routing table. So the number of routes per region, per IR space. Let's see. And then by country in the RIPE region, since this is a presentation specifically for the RIPE region, and the information is a little bit more distributed there than, as you'll see, it is in the North America. This is the breakdown per region. So the most routes in the routing table from a country is at the top in black, and then there's some Great Britain in the middle and across, and it's broken down by a month and year. And then within our region, there really isn't a whole lot of distribution. As he says, it's less than exciting, but he made the slide for me anyway. So everybody else down in the noise, and the US is up at the top with the big blip from the more specifics. Let's see. So some interesting numbers. There's 798 unique ASs visible in the routing table. And if you look at the way this is broken down, that was on 10/4/2007. The last measurement was 720, which was in May of 2007. There are 552 that are origin only, and they don't give transit. And then there are 211 ASs that give transit. And then there are some that are transit only. I'll talk a little bit about one of those later. There appear to be no ASs originating, at least except for that weird ghost problem, the 6 bone prefixes. And then there's a bunch that just originate one RIR prefix, which is really, maybe aggregation will work. And there are 14 ASs that have more than 6 prefixes. And then there are some ASs that still advertise the /32 and the /35 because the original minimum allocation was the /35, and then everybody got bumped up if they wanted to a 32, and some people still advertise both. And this is all observed from Garrett's AS 5539. So yeah, this is the two prefixes, the two announcements for the 32 and the 35. There's exchange prefixes being advertised, individual /48s. There are also quite a few PI blocks being advertised and assigned by the registries. They're /48s. This is a really interesting thing. I actually didn't know that people were using 32-bit ASNs yet, but it looks like there are several V6 networks that are advertising the 32-bit ASNs, and they show up as 3.7 and 2.3 and 6.3. And then if you don't have the right software, you show up as 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is in the transition plan for the two different size ASNs. This is a graph. Okay, let me try to explain it. On the x-axis is the prefix length, so /16, /20, /24. On the y-axis is the number of prefixes in the table. And the blue bar was a measurement on 10.2.06. The green bar is a measurement on 10.4.07. And then the skinny bar is the variation. So like if you look at the /24s, there were 3 on the 10.2.06, but in the routing table it was up to 40 at one point during the year. So that's what this graph is about. So he's trying to figure out a better way to show the variation. So if you have any ideas, let us know. This is just a snapshot of that information from 10.4.07. There were 921 prefixes, and this is the breakdown per RIR. So most of the advertisements are /32s. There are a couple super duper long prefixes, and there are a few super short prefixes, and certainly a lot more in RIPE and APNIC and ARIN than LACNIC, AFRINIC, and I don't know what other is. I'll have to figure that one out. So this is a breakdown of allocations by RIRs. And if you look at the individual RIRs and you don't look at how many total members they have, it seems like, RIPE has so much more, but as a percentage of members, they're all kind of about the same. Well, except he doesn't have good numbers for AFRINIC. And from the first measurement period of 5607 till the one that's on the left, like ARIN's gone up 26%, APNIC's gone up 10%. Let's see. And only 48% of the allocations are visible in the routing table, which is really pretty discouraging. This graph on the x-axis is the year that the allocations were allocated. So the solid box for that year is the allocations for that year, and then the colored boxes for each year are which of those showed up in the routing table on each one of these measurement dates. So in 2003, there were like 225 allocations, and if you look at each subsequent year, just a little over half show up in any given year, which is pretty consistent. It looks like it was a lot worse in, well, 2007 isn't done, 2006, not a lot of them showed up. And there are some aberrations in the data where, like, if two LIRs merge in the RIPE region, they reset the allocation date. But for the most part, this is a distribution of when they're allocated and what years they show up in the routing table. Okay, so these are the different kinds of allocations in a region and how many of them show up in the routing table. I think that it's interesting that only half of the critical infrastructure shows up in the routing table. If it's critical, wouldn't it show up in the routing table? But this is the breakdown of that. So in our exchange point blocks, not very many of them are showing up in the ARIN region, one of them in APNIC. So that's the breakdown of those. Looks like there's quite a few PI assignments in the ARIN region, 92. So there's some theories about why you'd get an address block and not route it. Maybe because you're losing interest in IPv6. I guess that could happen. You're preparing for the future. I'm going to get mine now before they change the rules. Maybe you're just routing them internally. There's no correlation between, academia getting them and being more likely to advertise them than commercial networks. And that there's a big delay, especially in 2003 and 2004. If you look at that chart with the bars, a lot of allocations had been sitting out there for 3 years and never showed up in the routing table. It says 40% of them. These are some notable allocations, and I think one of the big reasons why this slide is in here is that if you are filtering, you just have to be aware that there are a lot of /48s being allocated or assigned, and you might want to actually listen to them because there might be things there. Like I said, there are over 90 direct assignments from Aaron that are /48s, and if you're filtering on a shorter prefix, you might miss them. Of course, there are only 15 of them right now in BGP. There are also some very large allocations, 2 to corporate entities, a bunch to the registries, and those can all be found on the IANA site. Let's see. Okay, so there's some interesting things going on in the routing table. This one, the beginning part, the 2003, the /19, those are the valid routes, but this /64, nobody knows where it's coming from or why it's there. I mean, obviously it looks like it's coming from 2386, but they haven't been able to track down exactly why it's there, or if it's some sort of routing bug, or if it's really an advertisement. So people should, it seems like it's getting to the point where it used to be nobody filtered pretty much anything in V6, but it seems like maybe it's about time people did. This one, okay, so I've been presenting this for, in the outside of Europe for a long, long time, and this bug has been going on forever. Basically, in certain instances, if the moon is right and, you didn't pay your taxes or whatever, the router just forgets to issue a withdrawal for a prefix. It just forgets, like maybe you're configuring something while that happens, and it just forgets. So these routes just stay around forever, and they never go away. And it's been reproduced. It's in a bug fix, and it's been reproduced and fixed for probably a year, and it's still out there. So upgrading code is probably a good thing at this point. This one, the normal path is the /32 advertisement at the top. And no one's really sure where the rest of these are coming from because they don't seem to actually be advertised by who it says. And one of the theories is somebody's redistributing from BGP into their IGP and back into BGP again. But more likely would be that there's some sort of AS path truncation going on, and nobody really knows. But there's these paths, and they don't seem to be coming from anywhere real, and they're in the routing table. So it seems like BGP's been around for a long time. I'm surprised it's so buggy, but anyway. This really made me laugh because it reminds me so much of the early NSFNet days where we all had AUPs and all the routing was done based on some AUP. And traceroute came out, and we get these emails that said, oh, well, I can get there, but I really don't like the way I got there. And it was always some AUP, but the path was still decent enough and short enough, and the performance was reasonable enough. But in V6, there's AUPs with these research networks, and then there's these tunnels everywhere. So the research network isn't giving transit to commercial customers because of their acceptable use policy. And so all the traffic is going through this tunnel provider that's saying, oh, I'll give you transit, only it's taking forever and the packet loss is huge. So it's starting to get to the point where it's really going to be affecting performance because the only way to get there is this path, and the packet loss is huge. on some of these. There's some more online in an article. And so anyway, I guess there is no routing police though, so we'll have to skip that. So this graph is a look at route objects in the routing database versus routes seen in the routing table. And it's not a direct correlation. There's just the number of route objects and the number of routes is starting to be about the same, but whether they're actually route objects for those routes, we'll look at in the next slide because they're not. So there are 421 BGP routes in the RIPE region, and there are 425 route objects, and they're not entirely correlated. So there are 409 route objects for unique prefixes, and there are some that actually match the prefixes, and there are some that don't have a route object that have a BGP route in the table. And the point of this is to get people to start putting their route objects in the routing table so that people can actually do filtering. So, and this is how you do it. And it looks like, oh, I don't want to do that yet. It looks like in the RIPE region there's a lot more route objects in the route database, but in the ARIN and other RAR regions there aren't nearly as many. Okay, back to this. I love this. This was an April Fool's joke that became really interesting. So there's a path for a route, and it looks at how many miles the route actually is based on all the ASs in the path. So there's one, it's 40,000 kilometers for that packet to get where it's going. You gotta love tunnels. You just gotta love them. And there's another one that's 39,000 kilometers to get your packet where it's going. So you can get this tool and actually check it out yourself. It's pretty fun. Let's see. And these are I guess this went really fast. These are the different tools that you can download. There's a minimum peering policy project that's been going on forever. Last I checked, there weren't a whole lot of peering policies in v6, but I'm sure that'll happen more over time. So, and the slides are available online, and they get updated quite frequently whenever there's a RIPE meeting, because Garrett presents this at all the RIPE meetings. So does anybody have any questions? So quiet after the break. No? I guess not. Thanks.